What up? How you been, my bro? You just pop in, dude. You pop in at the weirdest times. I swear. It would be like in the middle of the night, or just like random Thursday, which I'm like not even working. I'm gonna try to get some reloading done, but she's trying my patience lately. What up, Tommy?
He was a struggling artist, living in poverty and
Oh
struggling
yeah.
to make ends meet.
I'm just hanging out, trying to see how many I can reload.
Mystical force controlling the universe. A sense of purpose. That he was part of something significant. In his search for meaning, Hitler was drawn to the writings of German mystics and philosophers, such as Guido von List, Georg Lanz von Liebenfels, and Rudolf von
Well. Look who decided to come.
known as the Ariostocracies, who believed in the superiority of the Aryan race and the importance of ancient Germanic traditions. Their writings fused occultism, mythology, and super history, created art that glorified the German people as the chosen race destined for greatness. The Ariostophists also had a strong emphasis on the occult,
110.
believing that through ancient symbols, rituals, and practices,
Say that again, Tommy. What are you talking about? 308?
this idea
110 VMAX in 308.
who saw himself as
I need
the
a
chosen
workup for.
destined to lead the German people to greatness. He also believed that
I
the stuff
don't have a TS money right now.
gained supernatural powers
Right now I'm looking to buy a new reloader
capable of achieving
just
his
for 9
ultimate
mil.
goal, domination. His interest in the occult was limited to books and lectures.
Let me borrow yours for like 6 months and I'll give it back.
One of which was the Order of the New Templars. This society practiced rituals and ceremonies that aimed to channel divine powers.
748 powder. Winchester 748.
Despite their claim to be descendants of the original,
What do you want to know about it? Do you need
the group
the
was
specs?
actually a conglomeration of various occult teachings and practices. Another significant influence on Hitler's
I would not be your friend anymore if you traded a TS for a SCCY. I'd be like, there's obviously mental problems.
founded in 1918, the Fool Society was heavily involved in promoting the Aryan race, anti-Semitism, and German nationalism. They also had links to the German workers.
Alright, because I got it too.
The Nazi Party.
I haven't done very much rifle reloading in the past like year.
And national beliefs resonated with him. One of the main ideas propagated by the whole society was the belief in the existence of a lost city called Thule, which was said to be the ancestral home of the Aryan race. This became the basis for Hitler's obsession with Atlantis, a mythical island first mentioned by the Greek philosopher Plato. Hitler believed that the people of Atlantis were an advanced Aryan race, and their knowledge and technology could be harnessed to create Hitler's interest in the occult went beyond mere fascination and curiosity. It is believed that he also practiced various rituals and ceremonies in an attempt to gain spiritual power and connect with the mystical forces of
Rifle is easy.
some reports suggest that he practiced meditation.
It's not hard.
And various
It's not as easy as pistol. I'm gonna get a Dillon 750. I've already decided.
he was also
Right when I get
brush
my
in his own blood.
deposit.
Version of ancient pagan symbols. The influence of Hitler's interest in the occult can also be seen in some of his keynotes and actions as a leader. For example,
Is that what you usually
occult
load
symbols such as
the
the swastika
50 grain?
and eagle were prominently used in Nazi
I usually
propaganda
reload it
and
55 and up.
The swastika in particular
55 grain, and then 62 or whatever. And then I have some like 77 grain.
Hitler's interpretation of the symbol was heavily influenced by the
But
Aryan.
I'm too busy with 9 mil
As a
at the moment.
representation of Aryan heritage. The use of ancient symbolism and rituals. It also is seen in the mass gatherings and rallies organized by the Nazi Party. These events are highly choreographed, and other symbols to create more mysticism and the use of torches, drums, and loud chants were meant to create a sense of transcendence amongst the members of the party, almost like an occult ritual. It is evident that Hitler's fascination with the occult played a significant role in his beliefs and actions. It is believed that his interest in the esoteric gave him a sense of purpose and made him believe that he was part of something significant. It is essential to note that Hitler's interpretation of the occult was heavily influenced by nationalist and racist ideologies, and his fascination with the esoteric led to one of the darkest periods in history. It serves as a cautionary tale of the dangerous consequences of blindly following Dietrich Eckart was a man who played a crucial role in shaping the beliefs and ideology of a German nationalist, Germans, and occultists.
Do you think I could load like 300 rounds today?
Of his political career. He was a prominent member of the Thule Society, a secret society that was heavily involved in occult practices and conspiracies.
I don't know if I can do all that.
It is believed that Eckart's
A lot of
influence on
reloading.
Hitler was a major factor in the formation of Nazi
I
ideology.
think I'm just gonna buy factory. I don't think I'm gonna be able to make enough. How many do I have? Let us see. What is up, DC? What is crack-a-lack-a-lackin'?
Eckart's mother died when he was only 10 years old. This event
There's a few in there. I got some here.
and he found solace in books. As a teenager, he was deeply moved by the works of Richard Wagner and Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, and he had a passion for music and literature. This love for the arts continued through his life and became an integral part of his political ideology.
Have any other bags? Probably.
After completing his education, Eckart went on to study law at the University of Rhine in Bavaria. During this time, he became involved in politics and joined the Pan-German movement, which aimed to unite all German-speaking people under one flag. He also became a member of the German Youth Cultural Education Organization that promoted nationalism and traditional values.
I got some new mags for my PCZ. I like these, even though they have like kind of a bad reputation. They ain't bad though. They're good for like about a year, and then they kind of suck.
Chamberlain's book, The Foundation
For that
of the
price.
19th Century, had a significant impact on Eckhart
Fuck it.
and become the basis of his own racial theory. Eckhart's dislike for the legal profession led him to pursue a career
See ya,
in
Tommy.
journalism. He moved to Berlin and worked for several newspapers, including the anti-Semitic newspaper, Through his work, he became known as a fiery civil rights, known for his passion for living. Early 1900s, Eckhart's interest in the occult began to grow, and he became a member of several secret societies, including the Germanic Order and Orientally Orientals. However, his most significant involvement was with a secret society that was founded in 1918 and was heavily involved in esotericism and occult practices. The Thule
Those are only freaking $14 AT. So if I have to like throw those away in a year, it's not that big a deal. I got 3 of them, and they look good too. I swear they're like clear. I used to stay away from them because you know the reputation. I've had them before, but then I saw a guy using them like at a major, and I was like, "Fuck it, I'm just gonna buy some." Because you know how much they want for the MBX, like extra long Glock mags? They want way too much. 200 shekels.
He was highly respected by the was often referred to as the spiritual guiding light of the society. He introduced many members of the society and laid the stage for his rise to power. Eckhart's involvement extended beyond the society. He was also a member of the Society of Western Governments, which was founded
Dryer next to him. Sounds like someone's getting their freaking back broke right behind me. authoritarian government and the elimination of all opposition. As Hitler rose to power, the Thule Society and its members created a crucial role in the formation and growth of the Nazi Party. Many of the party's early members go get on the construction site.
And its influence could be seen in the party's ideology.
You can find work before then.
The swastika was adopted as the party's emblem and was a symbol closely associated with the Thule Society, and its belief in an Aryan master race. Eckart's influence on Hitler extended beyond just his beliefs and ideology. He was also responsible for introducing the future dictator to several wealthy and influential supporters who provided financial assistance to the Nazi Party. Eckhart was a skilled fundraiser, and his connections with powerful businessmen and industrialists helped the party gain legitimacy and financial stability. Despite his close ties with Hitler, Eckhart often clashed with other members of the Nazi Party. He disapproved of many of their policies.
It sucks right now.
Violent tactics used by the soldiers and the party's anti-Christian stance. However, his loyalty to Hitler never wavered, and he continued his war to death. Dietrich Eckart died on December 26, 1923, at the age of 55 from a heart attack. His death was a significant loss for Hitler, who considered him a friend, mentor, and father. After his death, Hitler met a man who had a greater effect on my inner development than Dietrich. Eckhart's death also
Still worked for like some, like as a fucking roofer for a little
was a
while.
grand affair, attended by thousands of party members, and Hitler delivered a eulogy, declaring Eckhart a true hero of the movement. In the
Check
years
Craigslist. That's where I always used to get jobs.
the party saw Eckhart as a model and a saint, and his image was often used for propaganda purposes.
But I know how it feels. It's been
Despite
fucking
his writings on Hitler and the Nazi Party, Eckhart's legacy is often overshadowed by his
Definitely.
more infamous. Many of his writings and lectures have been lost.
job was
destroyed.
many times.
His involvement in the occult has been largely ignored. However, his impact on Hitler and the formation of the Nazi ideology cannot be denied. Eckhart's writings and beliefs were instrumental in shaping the racial and nationalistic theories that were the basis of Hitler's policies and would ultimately lead to the atrocities of the Holocaust. To understand Hitler and the occult in more depth, we need to understand the societies he was involved in. The Fool Society.
That's why you gotta travel, dude. When I lived in like fucking Hinesville, Georgia, dude, I used to have to drive all the way past fucking Savannah a lot of times, all the way up into South and North Carolina at some fucking job. And that was as an electrician. Even today, I gotta freaking. I gotta fucking drive far as shit sometimes.
Of the Aryan race, and their main goal was to promote anti-Semitism and establish the Aryan race as the dominant race.
But I got pretty lucky. I got my name out there.
The
Like,
society also held beliefs in the occult and ancient Germanic peoples, and saw themselves as the guardians of this ancient knowledge. They attracted many members from the upper echelons of German society, including industrialists, aristocrats, and influential politicians. But perhaps the most notable member of the Fool Society was none other than Adolf Hitler himself. It is believed that Hitler joined the society in 1919 and attended their meetings regularly. It was a crucial period in Hitler's life, and it was during this time that he was beginning to develop his anti-Semitic beliefs and charismatic leadership style. One of the key ways in which the Fool Society influenced Hitler was through their anti-Semitic propaganda. The Fool Society believed in the stab-in-the-back theory, which claimed that Germany's defeat in World War I was a result of the betrayal by the Jews and other minority groups within the country. This belief played a significant role in shaping Hitler's worldview and fueling his hatred towards the Jewish community. Hitler adopted this narrative and used it to rally his followers and blame the Jews for all of Germany's problems. In addition to promoting anti-Semitism, the Fool Society also had a strong interest in the occult and esoteric teachings. They believed in the existence of a secret brotherhood of ancient Germanic philosophers called the Black Sun, who possessed hidden knowledge and mystical power. This idea of a secret society fascinated me. The society also promoted the idea of creating a new religion based on a mix of ancient Germanic paganism and Christianity, which resonated with Hitler's desire to create a new order and establish himself as a quasi-religious figure. The Fool Society also played a significant role in the development of Hitler's political ideology. The society believed in the concept of Volkisch, which translated to people's community, and emphasized the importance of ethnic purity and racial superiority. This idea is aligned with Hitler's belief in the Aryan race and his
Oh, it's two of them,
desire
that's
for a
why.
racially pure society. The Fool Society also promoted the idea of a strong leader who would lead the people towards a better future.
Look who it is.
Desire for power
Tactical Vato. Dude, you gotta change your name for that. That's EDC is fucking. There's so many like EDC names, but there's there's only one Tactical Vato, bro. There's only one Tactical Vato. It's you.
The society also held secret rituals and ceremonies that involved the use of symbols and gestures reminiscent of ancient Germanic paganism, which Hitler incorporated into
You need a damn truck.
And ceremonies.
AT.
Although the Thule Society's
That is the
influence
clip.
on
That is the next thing.
is undeniable. It is essential to note that not all of Hitler's views and beliefs align with those of the society. For example, the Thule Society had a strong aversion to Christianity. Hitler used the Christian church, especially the German Protestant church, to his advantage. Hitler also had a strong sense of nationalism, whereas the Thule Society promoted a pan-Germanic ideology.
I am desperately trying to see how many rounds I can get pressed before tomorrow. There's no retracting messages here. There's no retracting messages.
Ideas of ritual purity and superiority had a significant impact on the masses, especially with disillusion and looking for someone to blame for Germany's defeat in World War I and the economic turmoil that followed. Hitler used
Dude, just
sentiments to his
make
advantage.
Make EDC like your second like screen name or something. Just make, you know how you have like the at symbol and then you have like your name, just like use one on each
Hitler's political career gained
for like a while, and then if it sticks, just
his interest in the occult.
I don't know.
The most significant occult beliefs that shaped Hitler's ideology was the
It's a
concept
cool name.
of the master race. This belief,
If I was more Mexican, I'd use it,
the most spiritual,
but I'm not that kind of Mexican.
making them destined to rule over the races. This belief can be seen in Hitler's speeches and writings, where he often talked about the superiority of the Aryan race and the need to purify the German people by eliminating those deemed inferior. Hitler's fascination with the occult also extended to ancient Germanic
I'm gonna get
and
thrown
Northern
off live for watching Nazis.
He believed that these
I don't agree with anything, but I do condone.
and advanced technologies. This belief influenced the Nazis' obsession with the city of Atlantis and their search for artifacts and relics.
Bro, these fucking documentaries are such bullshit. I don't believe any of this. They wanted to see Atlantis. Give me a fucking break, dude. The Nazis did not give a shit about
One of his
Atlantis.
closest associates was Heinrich Himmler, the leader of the SS.
There's no fucking Jews in Atlantis.
Ancient mythology.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
A research organization dedicated to studying ancient civilizations and their connection to the Aryan race. The Ananurba conducted archaeological expeditions in search of
I'm literally
evidence
afraid
to
they're
support
gonna
their
kick me
beliefs.
off. It's on YouTube.
Rituals and ceremonies.
Let's go to Modern Marvels instead.
System of fortifications. This is reinforced by the fact that after the American Revolution, you see a decline in the use of a series of fortifications and a return to the idea
So why
of one
has a
main
wing half?
fortification, which would lead to the building of Fort McHenry.
Fort McHenry was a coastal fort built to defend the city of Baltimore against a British sea attack during the war.
I'm trying to see how many
It
rounds I
was
can
here
get
that
done.
Francis Scott Key wrote the Star-Spangled
I
Banner.
might
Like
just
Fort McHenry, the purpose of Fort Pulaski
use
was to
my
protect the port of
wheels.
Savannah against foreign invaders.
It was in this environment because of its strategic location in the middle of the Savannah River that Lee and the administration of President Madison decided that they should build a fort here that could best protect the port city of Savannah, protecting not only the city but of course all the commerce, the rice that was cultivated along the coastal areas, the cotton, the pitch, the tar,
Compliant Armory. Que paso, amigo?
Because of Cockspur Island's marshy grasslands, Fort Pulaski had to have a special foundation to support its enormous weight.
It sits on pilings that go 81 feet into the ground, and on top of the pilings are what is called grillage. Grillage is nothing more than a fancy word for a large platform. And on that platform, on those pilings, sits this fort.
Fort Pulaski is pentagonal shaped. Its walls are 7.5 feet thick, constructed out of 25 million bricks that were made by local slaves. The fort took 18
Local
years to build.
slaves. Dude, History Channel's trying to give me kickoff live, I swear.
Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina, and the war between the states began. In January of 1861,
Unhireable.
the Confederate States of America
That's the same as me.
Fort Pulaski and began arming it for battle. In the meantime, the Union Army, led by Engineer Captain Quincy A. Gilmore, is building a series of field fortifications
I'm
and artillery
unemployable.
batteries on Tybee Island, a mile away
And that's why I
from
just
the Savannah River.
went out on my own.
By
You know what I
April
mean?
of 1862, they had painstakingly
Because
constructed
I mean, I don't always get into it with
batteries containing
not
46
all
cannons,
freaking contractors, but
all aimed directly at
man,
Fort
sometimes
Pulaski.
these guys be trying to rip you off, dude.
Gilmore decided to try out a new type of unproven rifled artillery for the assault. And that proved to be the death knell for Fort Pulaski.
Well, the point in history or the technology is a new type of cannon that would make this fort and all others all over the world obsolete.
On April 10th, 1862, Gilmore launched his assault. Soldiers on both sides were surprised by the performance of this new rifled cannonball. It could hit targets precisely over a
Fucking
mile
wall has a bunch of holes in
The
it.
ribs in the projectile allowed the blast to propel it on faster, longer, and more direct.
It's like a big ass fort. And they just shot it to shit. Where's that at?
The Union fired over 5,000
Union
shots in
fired.
about 30
I never
hours
liked the
before
Union.
Colonel Charles Olmsted surrendered. The precision of the cannon fire had succeeded in breaching two walls of Fort Pulaski.
After the battle was over, only 14 people were injured in the fort. One had died at the time and one apparently later on. Over on Tybee, there was not one single person wounded and only one man killed. So for a Civil War battle, it was relatively well.
Hidden among the groves and hillsides of eastern France lies what remains of the greatest defensive barrier constructed since the Great Wall of China. Built by the French between the First and Second World Wars,
The Maginot Line.
fulfilled the goals of its creators, and yet the French suffered a crushing defeat within weeks of open conflict with their enemies, the Germans.
The Germans.
The line survives largely in ruins, and yet it barely saw any direct assault on its defenses. For over half a century, historians have debated, was the Maginot Line a horrendous failure or a thorough success? Conceived as a direct response to the devastation wreaked upon France at the close of the First World War. It became equal parts
If I had a
technology
Dylan, I'd probably already have enough
and
rounds.
But it began as a
Press.
limited series of defensive fortifications in
I
Alsace-Lorraine.
think I've done like
near the
50
German
right
border,
now.
due to forestall a German invasion. It soon grew, at least in the minds of some, into an impregnable barrier over 500 miles long, extending from one end of France to the other. The Maginot Line consisted of reinforced subterranean concrete fortifications, linked by firepower.
Yes,
with
sir.
large underground galleries, some containing railroads that carried ammunition and troops.
Dude,
plus
for me to get a job, it'd have to be like
powerful weapons and
the best
communication
fucking
centers,
job in the
all
world.
designed to conserve manpower and keep Germany out of France.
And if they were like, oh, you have to come to work at this time, and I was like shooting that day, I would just
Villages are surrounded by
fucking
walls
quit.
designed to keep attackers out and villagers safely in. But fortifications have their drawbacks too.
just stick with the truck driving. You just gotta make enough money
But you
to.
have to defend them
get
all.
the truck,
You have
man.
to defend them all equally. Otherwise, your attackers going to go through
And you gotta get a truck. I think I've told you this before.
And this gives somewhat of an
And you have to
advantage
fucking do
because it
something
allows the attacker
different until you get enough, and then go back to it.
concentrate his strength
You
while
gotta
you
do what
have
you
your
gotta
strength
do,
spread
man.
out.
I don't mean to. I'm not trying to be any kind of way.
Warfare became a cornerstone in French plans for their future defense.
The logic being that the French needed attack, which in fact they didn't, as we all know, but the French liked to believe that the flimsy trenches, which were cheap, and bits of barbed wire and lots of machine guns, would keep the country safe.
That's a hell of a lot of money.
Whereas others proposed
You picked the
a
doozy
limited number of
of a career. Jesus.
because it was really ignoring advances in aviation, in artillery. But then it's a well-known saying that General Ford fight the last war.
The French knew that ultimately the Rhineland would be reoccupied by Germany if the Allies removed themselves from this buffer zone. If the Germans reoccupied the Rhineland, France would be vulnerable. At least along its borders with Switzerland and Italy, the Alps were a formidable barrier. In the north, Belgium was an ally. And in the east, the Rhine River and Vosges Mountains provided some protection. But the Rhineland was perceived as an open door, and the French endeavored to close it by undertaking a massive program of fortification construction along the Franco-German border.
In the 1920s, when they went to make the decision to go ahead and build a system of fortifications, the war minister set up several commissions. And about 1927, they set up something known as the CORF, which in English...
Micah, what is up, bro? How you doing, brother?
And what the CORF did was prepare the designs that were going to be used on all the fortifications.
I'm trying to see if I can reload it today.
Corf drew up the plans in the late 1920s, but the push to fund the construction of the defenses began with Paul Painlevé, who was then Minister of War. Painlevé was succeeded by a former war hero named André Maginot. But Maginot had nothing to do with the design of the barrier.
He bites that shit off.
Shortly after having initially secured nearly 3 million francs for the defenses, tall, solitary André Maginot died. 3 years later, a newspaper referred to the eastern defenses as the Maginot Line, and the name stuck.
The whole objective of the Maginot Line was to delay a German attack, not to stop the Germans from attacking, but to make it very difficult for the Germans to attack, and to be able to use this defensive position as something behind.
What do you do again, Micah?
And defend themselves and prepare to launch counterattack. So basically, it was intended to offset the population difference between France and Germany.
But the British would slowly shift.
As the decades moved on, and as the pressure for reducing military service increased, and when it became clear that one, the Rhineland was going to be evacuated, and probably ahead of schedule, two, the army was going to be reduced, the length of military service would be reduced to 1 year. The
Boiler operator. I don't even know what that is. Like the boiler in a building? The fuck? Or like on a ship or something? That's a badass job, dude. Every once in a while I get to see those things. It's not that often though. At Amazon, I get to see Amazon and shit like that. Probably take videos of it. Says no videos, take videos of everything. Fuck them. And the thing is, like, it'll be like no photography, and they'll be like, we need pictures. Like, okay, what the fuck?
Built by local contractors, construction was coordinated by Corp through the War Ministry and continued throughout the early 1930s. Ultimately, the Maginot Line contained about 1.5 million cubic meters of concrete, nearly enough to fill California's Rose Bowl twice. 150,000 tons of steel and 450 kilometers of roads and railways.
It's made up of a series of defensive positions connected together by anti-tank obstacles and by barbed wire. And there are defensive positions that fire
Later, Vato. Tactical Vato. Signing out.
And be under fire continuously. Periodically, this line is strengthened by stronger works called ouvrages, which is literally work in French.
The basic components of the ouvrages were massive concrete combat blocks, sunk low into the ground, so that they were concealed from view as much as possible.
The roofs of these were, in some cases, up to 10 and 12 feet thick of reinforced
It's in a
concrete.
paper mill. I
Each
just
one had its
make
own
steam
type
and
of
send it
armament
to the
normally.
mill
It might
up to the
be a,
departments that need it.
75 millimeter
All right.
gun turret. It might be a
That's still a
135
building.
millimeter howitzer turret. It might be an 81 millimeter mortar turret, or it might be what was called.
Does the paper mill
casement
smell
block,
like
which were,
shit?
instead of us being turrets,
Dude, I used to work at one like right next door to it. Smelled like shit, bro.
Ouvrages came in two
It's
sizes,
the worst smell
petite
ever.
and gross. Gross are large ouvrages
This smells
and
like
combat
rotting.
blocks that were armed with both infantry weapons, such as machine guns and
Doo-doo.
anti-tank guns, and with artillery pieces. The combat blocks of petite, or small ouvrages, were armed only with infantry weapons. There were ultimately about 24 gross ouvrages and 36 petite ouvrages in the line. Deep beneath the ouvrage, deep enough to resist enemy bombs and bombardment, was a network of tunnels and galleries that connected the blocks together and contained the ouvrage's support facilities. These facilities were decentralized to prevent catastrophic damage from a single direct hit.
The layout of the galleries in the gross ouvrages was basically tree-like, in that you've got a root system which is near the entrance block, anywhere from up to a half mile to the rear of the main work.
Underground galleries containing barracks accommodations. A power plant capable of sustaining the ouvrage, and the main ammunition supply were located near these blocks.
And then running from the roots to the crown of the tree where the combat blocks were is one long gallery. And through this gallery, there's a train called the Metro, after the Paris underground system. And this is what a lot of people have heard about. There really was a train. It was electric powered, and it was used primarily to haul ammunition. The troops mostly had to walk.
The combat blocks each had smaller underground galleries connected to the main gallery. These galleries included secondary magazines, small rest areas for troops, elevator shafts that lifted ammunition and supplies to the combat blocks. Combat blocks were usually two-story structures, with weapons mounted on the upper level, and ammunition and air filtration equipment on the lower level. Air inside the works was kept at a higher pressure than air outside, so that gas could not come in through openings. Large filtration systems were designed to filter out any poison gas. Ammunition, equipment, and supplies were brought to the line by trucks or special 24-inch gauge railroads, the same gauge as that used by trains inside the gross ouvrages. Diesel engines pulled small cars carrying ammunition and supplies into the munitions entrance blocks, where they were switched over and hauled by electric locomotives in the galleries.
The forts contained large amounts of ammunition, and provisions were made for supplying that rapidly to the combat blocks, because the combat blocks, although they were small in number and didn't have many guns, they had very rapid firing guns, and they could burn a lot of ammunition in a hurry.
The line kept a low profile along the surface. The exception was the fixed, unretractable steel dome called a cloche, which means bell in French. Over 1,500 were built, each large enough to hold 1 or 2 men. The cloches served many purposes, including observation and close-in defense. Sitting on the surface like giant steel mushrooms, cloches were made of very thick metal.
They were very strong, armor up to 10 inches thick, but it turned out that that wasn't really quite thick enough, because the Germans came up with the 88 millimeter anti-aircraft gun, which, although it couldn't penetrate in most cases, could certainly do enough damage to give the people inside a real headache.
As construction continued, the scope of the line was extended south along the Rhine River and west toward the English Channel. But the funding for the extensions was not on the scale that André Maginot had secured for the original Maginot line before his death, and was inadequate for the expanded system. Ironically, as the Germans began to learn more about the Maginot line, The French seemed to understand it less. In 1936, as the initial construction effort on the Maginot Line was nearing completion, Hitler gave France a dress rehearsal for war. Other events were taking place in the world of politics that would have an impact on the construction and usefulness of the Maginot Line. France had always assumed that Belgium would be its ally to the north, and thus hadn't extended the line to the English Channel. In fact, construction of the line had
I just left a comment on some fucking ratchet ass shit on Instagram. I was like, I might be too white to understand what's going on here, and apparently it got like a ton of likes.
Now,
I
where
thought
do
it
they
was
want to
funny.
concentrate? They want to concentrate on the northern frontier.
What was I trying to do? I
And
was
for a
trying to
good
text
long
somebody.
while, what they really would have liked is to concentrate them and to cooperate with the Belgians. So if there was a next war, it wouldn't be fought in France, it would be fought in Belgium. And after the Germans remilitarized the Rhineland in 1936, the Belgians backed out. Why should they cooperate with the French in using their territory as the main theater of operations? They were in a very, very difficult position.
In 1936, Belgium declared its permanent neutrality, and suddenly France had a huge exposed flank all along its border with Belgium. Beyond the dense Ardennes forest toward Dunkirk, the landscape posed insurmountable problems. The region is heavily industrialized along the border with Belgium. In addition, the land close to the coast has a high water table, making underground galleries infeasible. Finally, no natural barriers exist along this
What
flat
happens, man?
land. France decided to deploy soldiers along that border
It's
as an
definitely
defense.
happened to me.
At the same time that
Where I
France began
spend more money
construction
than
of
I
the
made
Maginot
that
Line,
day.
it began an extensive program of fortification construction in the Alps along the border with Italy. The difficult landscape provided better defensive positions. Although these fortifications were not necessarily as dense as those in the Maginot Line proper, they were similarly built, and their location often gave them a considerable advantage over an invading enemy. In 1939, the border between France and Germany was a taut line, stretched across Europe. As the decade drew to a close, so did any chance for peace.
Britain waged the war against Germany today. 25 years and 30 days from the time she entered the war of 1914 against the same enemy. France is expected to follow suit within the next few hours.
The Maginot Line was put on full alert, and troops were deployed along its entire length. In fact, France invaded Germany first, although it made limited excursions just over the German border. No serious offensive effort was ever considered. The French anticipated deploying the bulk of their troops along the border between
So you're saying France invaded Germany first? That's what they just said. France invaded Germany first, technically.
No modern army could invade through the Ardennes, so they didn't worry very much about defending it. The Maginot Line
Monsieur, we must get to Berlin.
and this proved fatal for France as the Germans pushed through.
It's going. I didn't schedule any work today or tomorrow.
They went through that area.
I have IDPA state tomorrow, so I'm trying to see if I can load enough. It's PCC. So I don't know, there's all these variables. I might just end up using factory still. I gotta see chrono and then do my thing 21. These messages I have.
For the most part, when the Germans did attack the Maginot Line, they were unsuccessful. With the combat block standing up well to bombardment by the heaviest artillery.
That sucks, guys. I got some new mags. I got 3 of these for the PCC. Give them a shot.
Without ever breaking through the Maginot Line.
I like them.
Within weeks of the German
Yeah, I should have done
invasion,
this.
France was
I
defeated.
filled up one.
Hitler was in Paris. The bulk of the troops along much of the Maginot Line hardly heard a gun fire. Word came down that France had capitulated, Undefeated, the troops surrendered the Maginot Line only to become
I always
prisoners
thought
of
these
war.
mags look cool. You could see
Soon,
through
the
them.
Maginot Line became a storage depot for German military equipment. The world was stunned at how quickly France collapsed under the German juggernaut.
In the long run, that may be one of the biggest failures in the Maginot Line. It may have engendered this false sense of security on the part of the French that perhaps they would have been better off to take the money they had spent on the Maginot Line and to spend that money on improving their army, improving their training.
By the close of World War II, the age of the fortified defensive barrier had ended. In the nuclear age, no serious attempt has been made to build a fortress around a country. And so the Maginot Line still wanders helter-skelter in the western fields of France, invaded only by tourists. Technological high point and low point, all at once.
The young men that landed in Normandy are old now, those that survived. Other men of D-Day have never left. They keep a silent vigil above the beach, defending against generations that may forget the price they paid and the promise they kept. They sacrificed their lives upon a wall that made an entire continent a fortress. Hitler's Etlantefall, a fortification of such magnitude that only the most ambitious and audacious attack in the history of warfare could possibly defeat it. And it did. In 1941, German defeat was almost unimaginable. Adolf Hitler's German war machine appeared.
10 gallons.
The Fuhrer seen and answered prayer.
Boy, got 3 extendos. I got 2 more.
Hitler promised a
Should I
way
take them out of the
out
box?
despair.
Should we do an unboxing?
Germany would
Just like real one mag
do
dump?
away with its enemies.
Okay, I wish that sincere to hear that. Check out my new unboxing pop. Pop that bitch open. Man, it's like 4 of my dick.
Belgium toppled in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Holland in 4 days. Battle-weary
I like that they're
France collapsed in
translucent.
7 weeks. By June, the Germans were in Paris. The Nazi blitzkrieg had taken a stunned continent by surprise.
Cool
By the end
packaging.
of the year, all that separated Britain from Nazi domination were the icy waters of the English Channel, a scant 20 miles. The German army had witnessed phenomenal success. Now it had to hold on to those gains while defeating its remaining enemies. England across the Channel, Russia in the east. But Germany
7.
had neither the manpower nor the materials to engage both countries in a simultaneous assault. Hitler had to choose which enemy to defeat first, England or Russia. The Battle of Britain began as Germany attempted to bomb England into submission. Unable to gain air superiority over England, Hitler chose to attack Russia. German forces were sent to the Eastern Front to begin the assault in June of 1941. But Hitler now had nearly 3,000 miles of Western European coastline to protect. How does an army defend so much territory with so few troops? At first, with expectations of a quick Russian defeat, Hitler planned to defend Europe with weaponry. Big guns around the major ports in Belgium, Holland, and France. But the Russians did not collapse as quickly as Hitler had hoped. The German army was stuck in Russia, unprepared for the approaching Russian winter.
When the Germans noticed that Russia was not conquerable within half a year, and there would be the front for some years more, the threat of England and America became greater. And that's why the Atlantic War was confronted.
A new
Very
plan was
nice.
needed to protect the Western
Trippy,
Front.
drippy,
More
hippie.
troops were sent to subdue Russia. Hitler's solution
Hell yeah.
that would defend every
Dude,
mile
I don't know if I'm supposed to like
from
mix
Denmark
that
to
ammo
Spain.
or not.
At first, a
I
modest
just need one
defense.
more.
Hitler's vision of the wall would grow as the war progressed.
I have filled up all my mags, but now I don't know if I'm gonna use that ammo, so I might have to take them off
Coordinated
my
among the
car.
German military to repel
I'll
an
shoot
enemy
some of them
invasion.
today. I need a third can.
Supplemented
I'm gonna
by
have to empty that
fortresses in
can.
strategic locations.
What would the Germans do more than defend it with blockhouses, batteries, everything? There were not troops enough, there were no armored divisions enough. They could make concrete shelters, they had laborers, they had
Big Bertha up
material,
top.
constructed things. The Germans
Yeah,
had no
those are
other
some
choice
cool ones.
than defend Europe.
I have some. I have more. My favorite ones aren't even up there right now. I mean, some of them are. They're all my favorite.
Limited resources and
I was trying to freaking
in the middle of a war.
The Germans had been in World War I, and they knew how to dig
review.
ditches.
Hell,
They
it
knew
censored
how
your
to
message for
put
whatever
trenches
reason.
in place, and they knew the kind of fire they needed to hold a position. And they put all
Later,
that
Smoke.
to use.
The basic strategy was laid out within a month or so after Pearl Harbor. That was Europe first, cross the Channel, go to the heart of Germany. That was our basic strategy from the very beginning. Everything was hinged on that. I don't know what would have happened if that had not worked.
The execution of such a plan would take years to prepare. Plenty of time, Germany believed, to build an unbreachable Atlantic wall. The Germans could be sure of two things in 1942. First, that the Allies would launch an attack from England. And second, that the Allies were
Yeah,
unprepared
dude,
to attack any
it
time
just
soon.
freaking.
But
fucking
Hitler's
is
attention
gay.
was drawn to the
I don't know what to
stalemate.
say. I don't know what to say. Fucking gay.
His army had been stopped and reinforcements were needed. Nevertheless, work began on the Atlantic Wall. Defenses extended from the Arctic Circle to the Pyrenees. Natural obstacles such as fjords and mountain ranges were incorporated into the wall. In fact,
Think I can make like 300? I'm probably like halfway there.
more than rugged terrain. The greatest natural obstacle of all was the English Channel. Notoriously unpredictable, the roiling waters had swallowed entire armadas. The Germans made use of French coastal defenses already in place in key strategic ports as early as 1941, which they supplemented with their own large coastal artillery battalions. Materials and labor, often forced labor, were taken from local communities.
An awful lot of the Atlantic Wall was made by Frenchmen, who were under the point of a gun working for the Germans. They were helping to build this wall, pour the cement, put in the steel reinforcing rods.
The Germans concentrated their construction efforts in the Prague and Calais area. They recognized
AI is
Calais as the
fucking
best
lame.
site
I
for
do
an
not
attack
like it.
against the continent.
They're gonna start like implementing it in a bunch of different places. Watch, it's gonna be super gay. It's only the beginning.
Less important or breachable coastline was fortified by strong point groups, defense structures that were smaller than the artillery batteries guarding the major ports. Even smaller individual strong points with less powerful weaponry were built in more remote areas. Concrete dome bunkers or pillboxes soon went up in France, Norway, and the Netherlands. They contained gun batteries ranging from 150 millimeters to 406 millimeters. By the fall of 1941, over 1,000 artillery guns lined the coast. By June of 1942, construction crews poured over 200,000 cubic meters of concrete every month. Ultimately, over 17,300,000 cubic yards of concrete, reinforced with millions of tons
Exactly.
of steel, would be utilized
And even
during
worse,
construction.
the court
Further,
system
the
will be
coastline
run
was
by
divided
AI.
into sectors
That'll be
guarded
probably
by
first.
troops.
That'll be the first thing that
50th
happens.
Army was responsible for the coast from the Netherlands to Normandy, including the key.
It's like that movie, Minority Report. They're gonna like arrest you for thinking about killing someone.
The first army from the Loire Pyrenees.
Thought crimes.
Eventually, the 19th Army would launch the Riviera coast, and the invasion from Allied troops in Africa. Instead of military training, many of the German troops along the Atlantic Wall spent their time in construction projects. Reinforced concrete bunkers were built with walls 3.5 meters thick, so thick direct hits by Allied bombing raids with virtually no damage. Elaborate and impregnable battery positions were constructed. Railways delivered ammunition. Camouflage was used to hide locations. In less than 4 years, the Germans had poured enough concrete to build 5.5 Hoover dams. The Atlantic Wall was the largest construction project of the entire war.
It's very, very remarkable that in a short time, the Germans built a lot of constructions. Little bunkers, but also very big bunkers. It's remarkable.
Type
But was
shit.
it enough?
Right.
The Allies had already begun an air campaign against Germany that forced workers along the Atlantic Wall back to Germany, where they went to work rebuilding a crumbling infrastructure. The Allies were also in Africa by 1942. The Germans were forced to retreat into Italy. With Allied troops in Africa, the Mediterranean coast of France also became vulnerable to attack. Thin German resources were stretched even further, as roughly 400 miles of Mediterranean coastline were added to the Atlantic Wall. In late 1943, with the possibility of invasion growing with each passing day, Hitler asked Rommel to evaluate the coastal defenses. Rommel toured the wall from Norway to the Pyrenees. He examined bunkers, gun emplacements, fortifications, miles of defenses, tons of concrete and steel, years of work. He found them woefully inadequate.
How do you defend the whole Bay of Biscay and the whole parts of Europe that come onto the English Channel, and then Europe up in the North Sea? You can't. It was just too long. There wasn't that much concrete. There weren't that many men.
Just as Erwin Rommel began strengthening Hitler's Atlantic Wall, the Allies across the Channel were planning their attack. Of primary importance to the Allies was choosing the invasion site. Calais was the obvious first choice, but the Germans had so heavily defended the Atlantic Wall here that the Allies were not sure they could take it.
They tried to go in at Pas-de-Calais, near Dieppe. They'd have been slaughtered because that's where the Germans had built the defenses most effectively. But when you started to get away from those ports to the south and west,
There were no harbor ports except for Cherbourg to the west and Le Havre to the east. The Channel
Did you
was
watch it?
120 miles
It's hard to get
wide
people to
from
watch it.
Portsmouth and Normandy. Germany is further away from Normandy than Calais. But the advantages were significant. The Germans had not fortified Normandy as heavily as they had fortified other parts of the wall. And since the Germans did not expect an invasion in Normandy, the Allies might catch the Germans by surprise. Rommel set about making sure the Atlantic Wall would be strong enough to stop the Allies on the beach. This meant infantry obstacles. Rommel asparagus.
Yeah, I mean, you can't watch it all at once. It's like 12 hours long. It's pretty crazy.
Miles and miles of barbed wire.
If only half of what they're trying to say, I mean, they kind of back a lot of it up.
Where they would be just underwater at high tide. Teller mines placed on top of these tetrahedrons guaranteed that if any boat touched or brushed them, the mines would explode. Belgian gates, which were first used to defend the Belgian coast, were steel barriers designed to prevent supply and troop ships from easy access to the shore. Hedgehogs, made from welded railroad ties designed to puncture holes in landing craft, were laid all over the beach. Large wooden spikes aimed toward the sea would puncture the hulls of landing craft. Machine gun nests strategically placed would lay flat across open beaches. Lowlands behind the beaches were flooded.
After you watch that video and then you go back and watch like the real footage of like, I don't know if you ever watched it, but I watched documentaries of like Nuremberg and stuff, and you just notice one thing, like all these freaking prosecutors and lawyers, they're all freaking, why are they all Jewish, dude? Interesting is what I'm saying.
Canadians at Juneau and the Americans at Omaha and Utah. They walked on the road. They supplied the ships. They foresaw every contingency. Cooperation was high, except for the weather. Storms were brewing in the English Channel.
Fascism
Seas
is
were so
perfectly.
high that Eisenhower feared the Armada would be destroyed before it got to
It
France.
definitely is. It goes,
On the morning
in
of
my
Tuesday,
opinion, it goes hand in hand with
Eisenhower's
my
staff weatherman
morals.
promised the weather would improve, but gray clouds scudded across the sky.
I was driving up in a driving rain, so I got out the World Bank ever going to order an invasion under these conditions.
God damn it,
So
this
he
thing's cracked
pulled.
too.
Once again, money always said
Just
go.
wasted a primer
The
on
Navy
it.
said, okay. The Air Force said, So I said, we'll go.
Eisenhower ordered the invasion on. There would be no turning back now. Over 150,000 men were headed to France to attack the Atlantic Wall and push the Germans back to Berlin. After years of planning, it was now up to the men who would fight the Battle of Normandy. The Germans stationed along the Atlantic Wall woke up to see the greatest armada ever assembled, ready to land troops, equipment, and weapons. The Allied soldiers had been told there would be no Atlantic Wall by the time they landed.
We got cruisers and we got destroyers, and they're gonna pound the holy hell out of those beach defenses that are on the rocks. And you're gonna have tanks coming right beside you. Now, when you get to that beach, you get behind those tanks and you follow them up to the top of the bluff. That's when your war is gonna start. You're gonna be through the Atlantic Wall.
But it didn't go according to plan. On some beaches, Allied bombing from the Armada completely missed the German fortifications. Not every beach posed the same defenses. At Utah, the Atlantic Wall hardly stopped the Americans at all. At Sword, heavy bombardment had in fact been successful for the British. But Omaha Beach was a shooting gallery.
They got just clobbered by German machine guns, by German mortars, by German AV-8s that were flying across the beach. And they just took horrendous casualties.
Still, the Atlantic Wall was simply not strong enough to stop the Allies. The war had been a success in some ways. It had delayed an Allied invasion, buying Hitler time. It prolonged the war and raised the associated costs of war, not just in tanks and guns and planes, not just in the cities that were destroyed, but in civilians, soldiers, and prisoners. The Atlantic Wall deflected the invasion to Normandy, forcing the Allies further from their ultimate goal of Germany. And on the beaches of Normandy on June 6, 1944, it cost men their lives. Approximately 4,900 Allied casualties that first day, many from Omaha Beach. Nobody knows the number of German casualties. But ultimately, the wall had been a failure. The Allies had breached the impenetrable barrier in 14 hours. By August, they were in Paris. By spring of 45, they crossed the Rhine to Germany. No wall could defend the Nazis along the entire coast of Europe, could resist the force of cooperation among the Allied armed forces, could withstand the juggernaut of American industry, could survive the good fight.
You want to know why the Atlantic Wall failed? Because of the people who went against it. That's why it failed.
After World War II, the threat of nuclear annihilation haunted the minds of military engineers and defense strategists around the world. Permanent fortifications were no longer viable, considering the power of a detonated missile. In August of 1949, an event took place in the Soviet Union that threatened the very existence of North America. The Russians had the bomb. Eventually, the growing Soviet military threat brought the U.S. and Canada together in a defensive partnership. In time, they would undertake what many believe was the greatest underground building project ever attempted. On June 1st, 1950, the first U.S.-Canada Emergency Air Defense Plan was approved by both nations. As a first step, Canada would make its northernmost territory available for a radar system that would have been cost prohibitive for them to build and staff on their own. This system would be nicknamed the DEW Line, for Distant Early Warning Line. The location of the line would be between the Arctic Circle and latitude 70 degrees north. This would provide the US and Canada with the earliest possible warning of a Soviet attack.
The stations were numerous, the cost was very, very high, and of course the conditions under which these stations had to be placed were severe in the extreme. Canada, especially up north, can be inhospitable in the winter, and we're talking about temperatures that certainly would freeze exposed human skin and test the vacuum tube technology of the 1950s to the limit.
In 1957, members of the U.S. Continental Air Defense Command and the Royal Canadian Air Force jointly recommended that the U.S. and Canada could best counter the growing Soviet military threat to North America by forming an integrated defensive system with a combined staff from both nations. The new organization would be called the North American Air Defense Command, or NORAD. On September 12, 1957, military leaders from both the U.S. and Canada celebrated the establishment of NORAD at Ant Air Force Base in Colorado Springs. However, their exultation was short-lived. Less than 3 weeks later, on October 4th, 1957, the Soviets stunned the world by launching Sputnik, the world's first man-made satellite, into Earth orbit.
It seems like the farther and farther you go back, though, the less and less they censored.
But to NORAD,
like, if you watch really old documentaries, they're like a little more truthful than if you like watch them today. Like, I watch a bunch of like, I like the World War II in like the Eastern Front, and so like all the documentaries today are all like super fucking biased, dude. They just don't even make any sense. You gotta watch the ones from like 2000 and before.
Which basically emphasized the role of the
like documentaries today suck,
defense and long-range strategic bombardment to deter the Russians.
Because they're all like, they're more like a. They're more like a.
At a certain point, the sheer number of nuclear weapons would overwhelm any sort of defensive system,
Somebody texted me right there.
ballistic system.
They're more like a reality show.
The best defense was
Yeah, I don't like the government to have too much power, but then at the same time, sometimes I'm like, dude, why don't they just like silence these people? Like, why can't we just not do that? Why do we have to listen to these fucking people?
America's offensive strike force could be wiped out in preemptive nuclear first strike. The idea was to deter a Soviet attack.
Yeah, a little more, exactly.
Capability for massive retaliation.
Boiling water analogy. Doesn't notice if you slowly turn it up.
Gotcha. Began to change from air defense to detection, assessment, and warning. Now, NORAD needed a radar system that could detect and track ballistic missiles to their targets. In early 1958, NORAD headquarters were located in a residential neighborhood in Colorado Springs, in an old brick building on the grounds of Ant Air Force Base. In addition to being much too small to manage the growing air defense system, the building was highly vulnerable to conventional attack or even sabotage, let alone a nuclear strike.
NORAD's Underground Combat Operations Center was a result of a number of factors, not the least of which was the perceived threat. When the Soviets exploded their hydrogen bomb and demonstrated a capability to marry that to long-range ballistic missiles, the secure command and control facility seemed essential.
The Air Force was given the somewhat
Gen Z
task of creating a hardened site, or an underground base from which the NORAD Combat Operations Center could survive and operate in after a nuclear attack. After a thorough study of potential sites, the Army Corps of Engineers recommended Cheyenne Mountain in the Front Range of the Rocky Mountains. Just 4 miles southwest of Colorado Springs, Cheyenne Mountain was near existing communication lines and supporting military installations. Most importantly, a geological examination indicated that the mountain's granite rock would offer the greatest degree of protection against the thermonuclear blast in the shortest possible construction time and at the lowest cost. The excavation and creation of the Cheyenne Mountain Complex would arguably be the greatest underground building project ever attempted. The Air Force design required a 253,000 square foot facility of 3 standing buildings beneath 2,000 feet of solid granite. After an access road was built, the first phase of excavation began on June 20th, 1961, initiated by a ceremonial first blast. To give some idea of how desperate NORAD was to complete the new hardened center, they insisted that work be done in 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, 6 days a week, until the excavation was completed. Over 1,800,000 pounds of high explosives were used to blast the rock away. More than 693,000 tons of granite were excavated. It took only 367 days to do the job.
The excavation itself, the building of the tunnels within the mountain, was an extremely large project. It was run by the Army Corps of Engineers, and they did an exceptionally magnificent job in accomplishing that.
Great care was taken in order not to blast away more rock than the excavation design called for. An innovative blasting technique called smooth wall blasting was used during excavation to prevent excessive fracturing or weakening of the granite. To ensure that rock throughout the excavation would remain structurally sound, the walls of every cavern were reinforced with a system of rock bolts. Placed in a 4-foot pattern, these 6-foot to 32-foot long steel bolts hold the rock together and provide the tension to withstand the shock effects of a nuclear detonation. Chain link mesh was then fastened to these rock bolts. The wire mesh prevents sprawling or the natural of small rock fragments. More importantly, it would catch any rock shaken loose by a nuclear blast. There are 2 entrances into the mountain. The north portal leads to a 1,500-foot-long tunnel, and the south portal runs for 2,500 feet. Both tunnels open into the central access tunnel, which is 1,000 feet long, 25 feet high, and 40 feet wide. The north and south tunnel entrances serve as air intakes. But more significantly,
Or possibly
they were
just
designed to allow
old
nuclear
America.
blasts to wait to pass through one end of the tunnel
Like
and
after
out
World
the
War
other.
One, they didn't want to get involved with anything.
The main complex is composed of 7 major chambers in a grid pattern. These chambers are 60.5 feet high and 56 feet wide. Phase 2, or the build-back phase of the project, began in early 1964. 11 buildings were constructed of continuously rolled 3/8-inch steel. Most of the buildings were 3 stories high. Each one was welded
You're
into a
gonna go take a
self-contained
leak.
box to protect sensitive electronic equipment from the effects of an EMP, or electromagnetic pulse, that is generated during a nuclear blast. An airlock system was put in place to filter out the effects of nuclear, biological, or chemical contamination. Blast valves and doors were designed to prevent the effects of blast pressure and were designed to close automatically by sensing changes in the outside air pressure. All utility conduits were joined at key junctions in the flexible type of configuration which allows pipes and lines to easily sway without breaking in the event of a seismic shockwave. Every system in the mountain was also constructed with a triple redundancy. With construction completed in early 1965, NORAD began the process of installing their computers, displays, and communications equipment into the new Subterranean Combat Control Center. Linking everything together and making it all work was not going to be easy, but military planners believed that our lives depended on it. The Soviet Union had already initiated the largest nuclear weapons buildup in history. In January of 1965, 1966, the new NORAD Combat Operations Center achieved its initial operating capability. Cheyenne Mountain had now become the all-knowing, all-seeing sentinel for North America.
Sure, we have an unknown.
Lord have mercy, you guys' comments are fucking too funny.
Approaches Anchorage. Captain Terraguchi notices two strange out of his cockpit window.
Very multiple signs. These lights are clearly maneuvering. They are in relationship to each other. One is on top of the other. And they move directly in front of his aircraft. Now, he's flying about 500 miles per hour. These things are pacing him.
Captain Terraguchi realizes the lights are strange oval-shaped flying objects. And they're getting dangerously close to his aircraft. As bright lights fill the cockpit, Captain Terraguchi radios the control center and asks if they can identify the objects he is playing. As Terraguchi attempts to avoid a potential collision, the two UFOs suddenly disappear. In their place is another object. One so large, it dwarfs the 747.
His words for describing it were gigantic ocean, the size of maybe 2 aircraft carriers. It is immense. Terraguchi sees as massive things, and he's scared.
Concerned by Captain Terraguchi's report, the air traffic controller calls NORAD, the North American Air Force Defense Command, based at Elmendorf Air Force Base, Anchorage. Communication specialists at the airbase confirm that there is a very large, unidentified object on their radar screens.
Traffic control told them that they could actually take whatever evasive actions they needed to avoid collision, and they even dropped down to 4,000 feet above sea level, and the thing continued to follow them.
Air traffic control diverted another commercial flight to come look at this UFO, and by the time they got there, the UFO was completely gone.
One of the reasons why the JAL report is such a big deal is because the corroborating evidence is overwhelming. Not only are there eyewitness reports, but there's the records of the communication systems that Terraguchi was in touch with. Actual dialogue that happened. Hey, we are up here. We see this. Are you guys seeing us on your radar? All this stuff is recorded. Once safely grounded, Captain Terraguchi, his co-pilot, and 3 engineers were immediately interviewed by Alaska Federal Aviation Administration officials and other special agents.
There's an FAA investigation into this. There's lots of documentation. There's no real hard and fast conclusion to this, and so the pilot was straight to the media.
In December 1986, after the encounter, Captain Terraguchi contacted Kyoto News
he believed the mysterious attacks were of extraterrestrial origin. Unauthorized statements prompted Japan Airlines officials to remove Captain Teraguchi from pilot duty and assign him to a desk job. Around the same time, John Callahan, the FAA's division chief of the Accidents and Investigations Branch, learned of the incident and deemed it worthy of investigation.
John Callahan went to D.C. about this, and there was a meeting that was chaired by one of the top people at the FAA. This meeting was also attended by representatives of the FBI, representatives of the CIA, and representatives of President Reagan's White House. They had audio tapes that were played between the pilot and air traffic control describing everything that was happening, and written reports. And at the end of the meeting, one of the CIA agents stood up and said, "This meeting never happened, and we're confiscating all of the data that has been shared here." Now, Callahan is a little sly, but he was within his rights. "They never asked me," he said, "if I had a copy of any of this myself." He said, which I did. He had a copy of the audio recording of nothing else, and over a decade later shared that with the public.
John Callahan came away with the feeling that there was essentially a kind of compromise. The FAA didn't want the fact that this incident had occurred to get out.
I've spoken to pilots who have seen amazing things like that, but never reported because of the fear of being believed, being ridiculed, and perhaps being grounded. You won't be flying anymore. So what did they say? Most times, nothing.
You have countless commercial and private airline pilots who spend an exorbitant amount of time up in the sky. And in my opinion, I think they're the best people to discern what is natural and what is not. As far as ancient astronaut theorists are concerned, UFO encounters reported by civilian pilots provide some of the most compelling evidence that there is an extraterrestrial presence in the skies of Earth. And according to some pilots, what they've witnessed presents a serious danger. For ancient astronaut theorists, UFO sightings pilots are particularly intriguing because their accounts of strange phenomena in the sky date back millennia. It is only in the past century that humans have had an aerial vantage point.
For thousands of years, we could only observe things in the sky from the ground. But in the last 100 or so years, we have the ability to fly. So if we're up in the sky ourselves, we can discern natural phenomenon from towering structures.
Thousands of pilots have reported observing phenomena in the sky that do not resemble any weather anomaly or man-made aircraft they've ever encountered. So was the case with Captain Eric Delgado, who served as an Air Force pilot for 10 years before being hired to fly for FedEx in 2001. On the evening of March 20th, 2020, Captain Delgado departed from Mexico City on Boeing 767 from Memphis, Tennessee. 1 hour into the flight, Delgado noticed something strange in the distance.
Usually when we get to altitude, we'll relax. I was conversing with my first officer, and as I'm looking at him, his eyes got really big, and his mouth kind of dropped, and I'm like, the hell is this guy?
The day was January 16th, 1945. The most feared and oppressive force the world has ever known was on the brink of collapse. during one of the darkest periods in human history. The Führer defeated, cowered within Deutschland, licking his wounds. The world would soon be rid of this nightmare. Having abandoned the very people he inspired to fight for him, as his minions fruitlessly fought tooth and nail to the bitter end on the surface, the maniacal leader of the German army, Adolf Hitler, and a small group of his confidants retreated underground in the Führer bunker, going mad as they await their imminent doom. This was it for the tyrannical lunatic. These were his final days. Decorated only with the finest creature comforts and the most high-class artwork, straight from the Reich Chancellery itself, the Führer bunker was made to be a place Hitler could comfortably reside in indefinitely. The bunker, located in Berlin, was vastly complex and entirely self-contained. However, as it was below the water table, conditions could become unpleasant and damp. As the end of the war beckoned, this subterranean fortress seemed like the best chance of survival. And so Hitler used this place as a domain with which to desperately and cowardly control his subordinates from a safe distance. Nazi politician Joseph Goebbels also made the decision to move below ground with his family to be alongside their beloved leader.
Joseph Goebbels is the Nazi propaganda minister. So he's in charge of cinema, books, the nascent TV industry. He's in charge of all the methods of communication. And so he's in charge of winning the Nazi message, effectively. And now he is married to a striking blonde woman called Magda. Now Magda has been married before, a very wealthy German industrialist, but she eventually is divorced.